U.S. military has sunk a boat, a speedboat in the Caribbean off to the far eastern part of the Caribbean near Trinidad, carrying 11, according to Defense Department records, 11 people. They're alleged to be drug smugglers. So September 2nd, and these, we're talking about it now here in December because these facts have just come out, launched a strike. They launched a laser-guided bomb at this little boat, the smuggling boat. And the blast kills 9 of the 11 people on this ship. The people on the ship may have been smuggling drugs. It might even be reasonable to say that they were probably smuggling drugs. But there does not seem to be any record of the passengers or the pilots of this boat being either armed. They may have been armed, but did not attack or show any aggression, if you will, towards the U.S. interdictive forces that were out there. So the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, was watching this in real time and saw when they just went and just blew the ship, this not a ship, but they blew this boat. Now normally if you have a criminal, then you detain the criminal unless somebody's life is being threatened. Then like, hey, there's a kidnapper or there's somebody that's holding hostages, and then of course you have to use lethal force. But in this case, they just go out there and bomb these people that don't really fit under the description of any kind of combatant. And they may be criminals. They may deserve to go to jail. They may deserve to go to jail for forever. But we have two troubling ingredients here. One is that there's a boat. We don't know what's on the boat. We can guess what's on the boat. And these 11 people on the boat, there has been no, not only has there been no trial, we don't even know necessarily if all 11 people were actively involved in any kind of criminal activity. Often when this actually happened to me not too long ago, where I was in a very small town in Colombia and I needed to get back to the city, and there was no transportation. There was a bus that normally ran and the bus was broken down. And so there was a truck, and the truck was going to go to the city. That was just where they were headed. And I basically, you could say, hitchhiked. And so I got on this truck and we got to the city, and then I got off the truck and went and did what I had to do. I don't know the people who owned the truck. I knew people who knew people. They weren't completely unknown to people that I have relationships with, but basically I wouldn't know where to find them today. I remember it was a gray truck. I think it was a Mazda. And I'm just a passenger, and I have no idea what they're doing, what their work or profession is or activity or anything like that. It wasn't anything criminal. I'm not trying to make it sound like it was anything shady or risky or anything like that. My point is that I'm just an innocent passenger on this vehicle. So now you have this boat, and there's 11 people in the boat. Now, normally, if you're going to be a smuggler, a drug runner, or something like that, you don't need 11 people on a small boat to do that. But still, the point remains that these people did not go through any type of due process. They did not go through arrest. The U.S. is capable of, especially with all of these naval assets in the area, even beyond that with the Coast Guard, with other types of assets, to stop a boat, to board the boat, or demobilize the boat, and to search it, to capture the people on the boat, whatever we want to do. If the people on the boat shoot back, then okay, that's a different story. If you're going to stop the boat in the middle of the ocean and board it like a Coast Guard when they stop a vessel and they say, hey, pull over, you've got to stop. And I used to be a boat owner, and I've had this happen to me even on lakes. You're out there, and then the lake police come and they stop you, and they're either the fish and game people, and if you're fishing, they want to count how many fish you have, and maybe they're the park police, and they stop you because they want to see if you've been drinking out there on the lake or something like that. And so there's all these different instances, and the Coast Guard stops vessels all the time and inspects vessels all the time, not just in U.S. coastal waters, but wherever the Coast Guard might be assigned in different areas. The same thing with the Navy. They do this all over the world. But the president, Trump, has elected along or through his defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, to just say, hey, we're going to shoot people. They're in a fast boat. Let's shoot them. And it's troubling, aside from the fact that you can kill innocent people that don't have anything to do with any kind of smuggling. There are other reasons that people have fast boats on the water that are not doing anything illegal. I used to love to run my boat, and I would race it sometimes. I had a 17-foot boat, and I had a big Mercury. It's not big for ocean, but it's big for freshwater where I lived. A big Mercury V6 on it with 6 carburetors. Man, I miss that. You know, some people, they say that the happiest days are when a guy gets a boat and when he gets rid of the boat. But I actually miss my boat. It's a lot of work. But getting back to the point, there are plenty of reasons to be out there. And by not just, and so what they did is, so they shoot this missile, a GBU-69 bomb, and they blow up this boat, kill 9 of the 11 people, and there are 2 survivors. Now, what happens if the survivors, if you go and pluck them out of the water, and turns out they were not doing anything illegal? They probably were. That's not my point. But will maybe give an account of who else was on the boat, and that some of those people on the boat might not be tied to whatever activity was going on. Or even if they were, by killing everybody, as the military did in this case, with there being no survivors and no records of survivors where we have bodies and we could say, okay, let's take fingerprints and identify these corpses or something like that, they evade having to answer to, hey, you killed these people. Who were these people? What were they doing? And why? So right now what happens is somebody leaves from Venezuela or Colombia or wherever. They're out there in the ocean and they just disappear. And there's no, well, you can't say, hey, the U.S. military killed my cousin Jose. Well, Jose just disappears and never comes back. And so what it looks like they were doing is destroying all of that, any kind of evidence or any kind of witnesses or anything like that. Because what they did is there were 2 survivors. They have this surveillance footage. It's not any kind of a conspiracy or anything like that. There have been congressional hearings. Admiral Frank Bradley of the U.S. Navy decides that they're going to go back and finish these people off. Now, they're alive, okay? So generally, even when you're at war and you have, I don't know, like 2 ships, and one ship shoots and sinks the other ships, they tend to take prisoners and go and pick up people that are survivors, and they become prisoners of war. In that case, with criminals, you take them to court and you arrest them. So you have judicial killings where you have, okay, a judge says you're going to get the death sentence or something like that. Extrajudicial killings are when there's no legal process taking place. And this is where you have dictators and people like Pinochet back in Chile in the old days, or people like Trujillo in Dominican Republic. And they were just like, hey, I don't like you, I'm going to kill you. Or Che Guevara and Castro in Cuba, they had La Pared, they had the wall. And so Castro, once he got in power, him and his compinche Che Guevara, they're like, hey, you're a dissident, we don't like you, or you're not convenient to the revolution, and so against the wall, a la pared, they would say, to the wall, and they would just assassinate you. And these are extrajudicial killings because it's not like a judge convicted you Not even a sham trial like you would have in the Soviet Union or something like that. It was just like against the wall. So you're seeing this boat out there that's not attacking anybody. Now, Hegseth and Trump and these guys say, oh, they're narco-terrorists. Well, a narco-terrorist is a real thing. And these are groups like the FARC dissidents, the ELN that's still active, where not only are they involved in drug trafficking, but they go and they conduct activities designed to sow terror and disorder. So in Colombia, for example, the FARC dissidents will go and recently they blew up two electrical towers in the outskirts of Medellin to cause blackouts. Or there's a new highway that goes between Medellin and the Caribbean coast, and they just opened it, and so I believe it was the FARC dissidents. It might have been the ELN, but it was either the FARC or the Clan del Golfo, which is just a big mafia. They went and set some bombs off on the side of the road and created a landslide to cover this new highway, cutting off the town that was on the way where it was going, so that everybody was isolated. And they did this, according to them, in revenge for one of their bad guy brethren got captured by the government in a standing trial or whatever. So the government, of course, is, in that case, the Colombian government is providing a judicial trial and saying, hey, we captured this bad guy, we think he's a bad guy, and he's part of the Clan del Golfo, or he's part of the ELN, and he's doing this crime, so we need to send him to jail. Colombia doesn't have the death penalty. Some places the U.S. has a death penalty. In some cases, whatever the case might be, there's a whole trial, hopefully a fair trial, and you convict the person if they're guilty or if you have enough evidence, and so on. That's a narco-terrorist. So that is a real thing. But you can't just say somebody's on a boat or somebody is involved in the drug trade. And let me be clear, I am an anti-drug person. I am especially, this is my personal opinion, I don't really care about marijuana. I've had friends who, when we were young, they used marijuana and they all outgrew it. They all are professionals now and lawyers and accountants and bankers and respectable people otherwise. And I've never seen anybody die, other than maybe they can get lung cancer or something like that because smoke isn't good for you, from marijuana. But I'm especially talking about these chemically processed drugs such as cocaine and heroin and methamphetamines and fentanyl and all of these different types of things. I'm completely anti-drug person, okay? So I have no sympathy for or desire to coddle or protect anybody involved in the drug trade. I've seen how it destroys lives. When I used to be a stockbroker, I had a client, and he was an engineer, and I saw over the span of a few weeks all of his money. He had still like about $150,000 invested with me or something like that. And I looked at, and in the old days, you had to call your stockbroker to get your money or whatever. But I am, I guess, young enough where when I was a stockbroker, we already had computers and online systems, and kind of like with the bank, you can go into the bank and talk to your banker, or you can go online and, you don't need to talk to a banker and you can just withdraw your money or whatever. So when I was a stockbroker, we already had those systems. And this guy, all of his money, I remember the first time he took out like a $36,000 withdrawal. And I remember coming into my office, I freaked out because I'm checking all of my clients' balances and making sure everything is okay. And I freaked out because I saw this guy's account balance had changed. It had gone down almost $40,000 in one day. And at first I'm thinking that did I put him in a bad investment? Or I was really freaking out. I remember I had like that physical feeling of a brick in your stomach or something like that. And, I had calmed down and looked at what was going on, and I saw that actually he had made a withdrawal. And this was his retirement money. This money was in a retirement tax advantage account that you can't just go and spend like a checking account or something like that without all kind of penalties and things like that. Turns out I didn't know what was going on, but it turns out, and it's his money. He can do what he wants to do with it. I can't really make a judgment. My job is to give him counseling and advice and things like that. Turns out, after he spent all of his money, his wife was one of my clients as well, and but they had separate accounts and everything like that. So because of privacy laws, I can't tell her what's happening in his account because they're not joint, and I can't tell him what's happening in her account either. I'm going to find out. I remember I'll never forget this. I had lunch with her after everything kind of blew up, and he had become re-addicted to cocaine. I didn't know this, but he had earlier in his life been a drug user and then was clean and had his life together, and he was a successful professional, worked for one of the major telecom companies in the U.S., and he had spent all of his life savings, lost his job, and at this point lost his wife and lost his child, and she was a professional in a different field, and she almost lost their house, and I'll never forget that. So I see how drugs destroy lives. So yeah, I'm all for locking up the drug dealers. You won't get any complaint from me. What I do think is a problem, and I do think that we are better than this as a people, and I'm talking now as an American, I'm talking as a gringo, I'm talking as a Buckeye, I'm talking as somebody from the United States, than to go out there and commit the same types of crimes that we have condemned others for. As a government, it's one thing if we're in a war, but we're not in a war with anybody right now. We don't have a declared war against any country. We don't even have an undeclared war against any country because as far as I remember, the United States hasn't declared war, since World War II? Meaning that with the congressional action. Um, you can't just go out there and blow up boats, private boats, with people on them in the Caribbean. People that are not combatants, that are not coming to blow anybody up. They're criminals, maybe, so we capture them, okay? Because blowing up people creates, first of all, it's unjust, but it also creates a nasty precedent that can then work against us. First of all, we lose our moral authority. We can't claim to be in the right when we're just out there blowing up people because we suspect them of something. You know, we talk about police abuse in the U.S., and there are mostly good police, but then you have these police, unfortunately, they sometimes get caught when they shoot people that shouldn't be shot, or when the police acts as the judge and the jury and the prosecutor, which is not the role of the police. And that guy looks suspicious. I'm shoot him. Okay, or even not shoot them, but even when you arrest people without probable cause and things like that. But still, even if we don't necessarily hold these people to the same standard, maybe we should, even if we don't. You can't just go out there and blow up it. First of all, just start blowing up boats. Then second, if there are survivors, and this, I'm not going to pretend to be a lawyer or a maritime lawyer or anything like that, but there are rules and conventions that we are signatories to. So when somebody is in distress and needs rescue, we have a duty to rescue these people, pull them out of the water, lock them up if they're okay, convict them, they're guilty of crime, this, that, or the other. But you don't shoot people who are treading water, trying not to drown, and we come and drop bombs on them. That's not who I think we want to be as a country. And this is something that is a policy that the president has called for, Donald Trump. He's called these people enemy combatants. A combatant is somebody that's shooting at you or trying to throw a bomb at you or trying to blow you up or something like that. Or a terrorist, like I'm going to blow up this building or something like that. That is a combatant. Somebody who might be a smuggler is not a combatant, no matter what they're smuggling, unless maybe they're smuggling plutonium or something like that to make a bomb or to sell to Iran or something crazy like that. So Admiral Frank Bradley, whose discretion, who actually ordered the hit, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, or now what do they call it now, Secretary of War or some kind of nonsense like this, going back to these terms that we used in the uh, pre-World War II, and the administration are going to have to answer for this sooner or later. Under the law of armed conflicts, when you're shipwrecked, your ship's been disabled or blown up or something like that, then if you're in the water treading, if you're like in the ocean treading water, you're not shooting at anybody, you're helpless. You can't go and just blow up helpless people. Remember the Japanese did this in World War II. So when our people, like they'd come by in our ships after they like torpedoed a ship or something like that, then they come by and instead of rescuing the people, or instead of just leaving the people alone, to drown or to be eaten by sharks, they'd come and machine gun them all. They'd come and strafe them all and kill the people who are now helpless because their ship's already sunk and they're floating around in the Pacific Ocean. And they came and would shoot at these people. And we say, hey, that was war. Those were war crimes, and the Japanese are war criminals for doing that back then in Imperial Japan. And we had trials afterwards and convicted a lot of them. I believe some of them were hanged. Some of them were put to death. And so now we're doing the same thing. Basically, what we're doing is similar to when those were real combatants, because we were trying to kill the Japanese and the Japanese were trying to kill us. And even still, so, hey, your ship sunk, then they would come back. And I don't know if maybe we had done it as well, but even under the rules of war at that time, you can't go and just kill helpless people floating there in the water who are no longer armed, who are no longer a threat to anybody. But we did that. So I think the admiral said that, oh, well, I couldn't be sure. You're in the middle of the ocean. Like, sure of what? Maybe they had communications devices. So, okay, they have communication devices. With all of our satellites and surveillance and these ships and Aegis defense systems and all of these electronics, you can listen and see what they say. Use that as evidence against them. But still, so this guy, Bradley, goes up and has a congressional hearing to defend what he's done. Legal experts have said that, no, if you're in the water in distress, you're shipwrecked, and that protects you. You can't go and just drop bombs on helpless people like that. And so I'm very concerned because I believe that this goes against who we are, who we claim to be as a country. And I believe that government, in this case, our current government, our current administration, is in the wrong and is due to be held accountable for what's happened. So if we, the survivors we're seeing out there, they're waving their arms and things like that and saying, hey, supposedly help me or something like that. The ship was supposedly headed not to the U.S. or to any transshipment points towards the U.S., but perhaps headed to Suriname, which is on the east coast of South America, where it would then be transshipped off to Europe. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if these types of strikes continue. But what I am also interested in is what the long-term ramifications are. I hope that they stop, because not only do I believe it's wrong, but I believe it can have serious political consequences for us, both within our relations in our neighborhood, in our relations that we have, our multilateral relations throughout the Americas with our neighbors in the Caribbean, in South America, and Central America. But then also more broadly, because what happens when Americans are off somewhere in a boat somewhere in the Caribbean? People have motorboats, and my grandfather used to have a motorboat in Miami, and he'd take it out and go fishing. My uncle, rest his soul, did something really crazy, and he took his little small boat to from Miami to the Bahamas. He regretted. I mean, he made it safely and everything like that, but he really was kind of terrified at that point. The boat that he had was really too small for this. So he's out there not doing anything illegal or illicit. But what happens when a neighboring government, what happens when Cuba, who's not on the friendliest terms with us, decides, hey, we're going to blow up that boat because we thought they were smuggling, they were human smugglers, or we thought they were smuggling capitalism to Cuba, or whatever the case might be. So you see that we create a precedent when we do this. And so then you go, well, wait, that guy wasn't doing anything wrong. And Cubans, not Castro, he's not there anymore. What's the guy's name? Canel, I think the president of Cuba right now. Well, I couldn't be sure. Or we destroyed, there's nothing there, so there's no more evidence. Or, if they sink him, then all we know is, hey, this guy disappeared, and maybe he has one of those emergency beacons on the boat or something like that. But this guy is killed by a neighboring belligerent government to us, like Cuba or something like that. So you see what we open the door with when we do this. And so not only is it an unjust and inhumane thing, and again, I'm not talking about in any way piling narcotics smugglers or anything like that. I believe in capturing them and locking them up and making examples of them. But you can't just take a boat and blow it up, and then there are helpless survivors and blow them up. That is probably some kind of war crime or something like that. Hegseth supposedly gave an order to kill everybody, and that can be disputed, and he might deny that or something like that. But that is not an order unless you are at war with somebody. Kill everybody. That's not outside of a war. That's murder. And unless you have under the death penalty, which I don't think narcotics smuggling counts towards. So let's say if you're captured in the U.S. and you're a super like El Chapo Guzman from Mexico, he's in jail for life. He's not been killed. He's not facing the death penalty. So it's really chilling when an appointed political actor representing the country, representing the government, gives an order to kill everybody without even knowing who they are. Not just that, that's bad enough. But then when there are survivors, rather than going and rescuing / capturing them, to drop a bomb on them, to drop a bomb on people who are treading water in the ocean. Again, that's not who we are as a country, and I don't believe that those are our ethics or our principles, nor should they be. So we will see what comes of this, both in the short term and the long term. Let me know what you think. I'm sure that there's some of you who disagree with me, and I'd like to know why you disagree with me. I'd like to know if you think we should just blow up boats because they're going fast, or if this is something that warrants shoot on sight, smuggling materials or something like that. And by the way, they were not smuggling materials to the U.S. They were smuggling materials evidently from Venezuela to Suriname. So if you look at a map of South America, you've got Colombia in the Caribbean Sea, and then bordering Colombia to the west, you have Panama, you have the Caribbean shore, then you have Venezuela, and then once you go past Venezuela, you have Guyana, and once you get past Guyana, you have Suriname, and then you have French Guyana. So these drugs were being smuggled from Venezuela to Suriname. And again, capture the people, lock them up. I have no interest in defending them, but they weren't coming to the U.S. So how do you justify the U.S. just, hey, let's go and drop a bomb on this boat, and then, hey, there are survivors, they're helpless, they're treading water in the middle of the ocean, let's drop another bomb on them. I really would like to hear from you if you think that this is a great idea, and I'd like to hear why. Also, and if you don't think it's a great idea, if you agree with me or somewhere in the middle or have some other opinion, I'd like to hear what you think about that. But do you support the administration? Maybe you support Trump, but you don't like this. Maybe you don't like this policy and you don't like Trump, or maybe you like this policy and you don't like Trump. Let me know. Let's mix it up. I'll be waiting for it there in the comments. So thank you. By the way, be sure to subscribe to the podcast.